Welcome, low ego action heroes. I'm still trying to put on some makeup. Hi, it's Debbie Levitt from Delta CX, and you can check us out at deltacx.com and customercentricity.com, which I hope to be improving over the weekend, greatly improving based on task analysis and optimized task flow. I'm kidding. I'm just going to make them better. And welcome to Office Hours Ask Us Anything, because we do have a special guest today who'll be joining us in just a moment. But first, the usual thanks and business. I'm going to click this button and it says thank you. Now, I know this is a month or so out of date. Google makes this so awful for me to copy everybody's names in. They change all of your special characters to blah, 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 blah. And so I have to fix all of that. But thank you to everybody, past, present, and future, who is supporting the channel in small and large ways and keeping me in streaming software and chocolate chips. We've been having a little problem with the live chat lately, so I'm going to refresh it. But hopefully, if you are here, you can give us a little chat message. Okay, it says bot is running. If you're here, give us a message in the chat room and say hi. And don't forget, ask your question in the chat or use the anonymous link at deltacx.com/links. We have like 6 questions already, so we will do our best to get to you. And if we can't get to you today, we'll have to save you for next week. So with that, let's bring in our guest using a cheesy Zoom effect. And John N.A. Brown is back. We're trying to have him here often. John, oh, hi, Deanna. Thanks for posting a comment. Hi, Credence. And I also made the chat messages a little bigger. What do y'all think of that? John, tell us who the heck you are.
Oh, I'm just this guy. Let's see. I'm an old school UXer like yourself from back in the days before UX was called UX. I've been at it for several decades. I have 7 university degrees in 7 different topics, including 3 PhDs. I've written a bunch of books, and I've worked for some of the biggest companies that you've all heard of, whose products you use every day, and some of the smallest companies you've never heard of, whose products you may never see.
Excellent. Okay, good. Hi, Brandon. Hi, everybody joining. So I'm just going to start getting questions up on the screen because these have been coming in for days because we didn't do a show last week. I was at UX Copenhagen. And here we go. So this is very tiny and impossible to read, but I'm going to read it out loud. It says, I've been struggling to get my first junior UX job for a while. I found that some of the past internships were very poor in quality. There was a total lack of UX maturity where we made designs with no user research data, no roadmap, etc. Because of this, I'm not able to communicate properly in interviews. Questions such as handing off work to developers, walking through projects, and other behavioral questions in a detailed way. My question is, should I go back to school to do a master's in design? The college where I did my undergrad, they offer a master's program where students learn about not just designing for users' needs, but seeing how the product will work to accomplish business goals. That way, I can do better quality UX work and network with industry professionals. Or is it best to refine old projects?
Wow, big question.
John, you first usually,
Oh,
unless you want to pass.
all right. No, I'm happy to jump right in. Going back to school isn't a bad idea. Going back to school during a economic downturn is often a good idea. It's a way to protect yourself from a time when you may be forced to take work that doesn't pay you well enough for your efforts, that puts you in a situation of economic and thus emotional fragility, where you can fall victim to the whims of people who don't care for you. Going back to school can provide you a little cocoon while you are also getting the additional training that you were talking about. Um, School will not replace business experience, but school will give you a lot of skills, especially if you're doing a master's with people who are well intentioned and well informed. It will give you a lot of skills that you might not currently have, and also give you this chance to network with people who are experts in the field. So yeah, if you can afford to go back to school, if that's an option for you, it's a fine idea during harsh economic times.
Yeah, I think it's a good advice, and I also think it's very interesting to hear about a program that's going to combine UX with almost like a mini MBA or some sort of business goals. And I think UX practitioners do need to show that fluency and those strategic skills. It can't just be, hey, I push Figma around. It's really got to be, here's how we best balance customers and users with what the business wants. So I'm very curious if the person is either here in the chat or watching or can comment on the video later. I'd love to know what program that is. I wouldn't necessarily do it at this point, but I'm curious if it's one that I should be recommending to others. So I would love to look up that program, see how long it is, see what it costs, and learn more about it. But it definitely sounds like one of the more interesting UX masters I've heard about. So yeah, and again, that doesn't stop you from refining old project. You know, there isn't an or here. You can go back to school, and you can also take a look at some of your old projects and or even just tell a new story in your portfolio. Hey, because this was an internship at a company that just kind of wanted to do things as fast as they could, this is how the project went, but here's how it should have gone. You know, if I had had more time or more budget or something, we don't want to throw someone under the bus, but hey, if I generally had more of what I needed, I would have done this type of research with this many people to learn these things. I would have done this type of thing. And that just is a little storytelling where even though I can't see better work, I can say, ah, this person seems to have some idea of what they should have done. I like their thinking. And maybe it helps you get the interview. We're going to be doing a super special show. I think it's April 21. Deanna's going to like this one. Yeah, it's April 21. So there's a friend of the show, as I like to call people, and he sent me his portfolio to review, and very rare, I was really impressed by it. Those of you who ask me for portfolio reviews know that sometimes I come back to you with something where I say, you know, ooh, sorry, but red flag city here. This one really impressed me, and I thought it would be really nice to work with this guy. And then the next project we got at Delta CX was very similar to what the guy had done in his portfolio, so I hired him. And so we just finished that project. So sadly, I'm not working with him today. But we're going to do a show on April 21 where I'm going to walk through his portfolio and show you what I liked and what I didn't like and how he kind of accidentally got a job from sending in a something for a portfolio review. So, and I think Diana comes from his world. So, okay, so let's look at the next question, which is even longer. So the font is completely unreadable. I'm just going to put it up for comedy. Um, and I'm on a 50-inch television, everybody. I'm on a TV screen, you know, wider than I can show with my hands, and I can't read that either. Okay, so let me read it from my Microsoft Notepad. I am often in so many different meetings, not from the agile package of meetings, but actual necessary alignment meetings between the many teams that are working on different but overlapping parts of the product. I arrive at the end of the day with lots of information on what I should and need to get done, and lots of talk on what we and I are going to do. But then my brain is kind of giving up, and it's really hard to pull out good thinking time and quality work. I'm still managing to do what needs to be done, but I'm not happy with the quality of it. I really feel like I am under delivering my design tasks. And I'm troubled that people might think this without telling me. I'm also going to leave the project in 3 weeks. Not my choice. I work for a consulting company that was hired by this company, and they ended the contract because they recruited enough people now. We were just covering for a transition period. I don't know how to make the most of it because it's the same vortex of meetings every day, and I have so many things to do while feeling burned out and doubting what value as a designer I have.
Wow, tough one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that you're in that state. But I think a lot of us have been there, and those who haven't should count themselves lucky. Uh, Unfortunately, when you're working with consulting companies, it's very possible that they're going to either create a situation or insist on a situation where you have to spend an awful lot of time um, in meetings that don't need to happen, which is terrible, or in meetings that do need to happen, but then take up all the time you're supposed to be spending on design. What that means to me is that they've got the wrong management structure in place for the project. Somebody else should be dealing with at least some of those meetings, and the information should be condensed before it comes to you. If they're actual meetings of discovery where you need to participate in order to pull out the information that others might not be able to pull out, or to synthesize the information that others might not be able to synthesize, that's different. But even then, that means that their time budget is wrong because all of that work has to be done before the designing starts. So you're in a quandary. And again, I'm sympathetic. What I would suggest to you is to do something a little bit radical. At the end of the day, when you are exhausted, sleep. Turn on Netflix if you believe in corporate structure. Watch out your window if you live a happier life. Um, but sleep, relax, let your brain go elsewhere. When you are unconscious or semi conscious, you'll be able to better synthesize all of the new knowledge you've gathered during the day. 6 hours later, 8 hours later, whatever the amount of sleep is you usually budget for yourself, get up and do the design work before the next day's meetings start. Not half an hour before they start, but just take that 3 hours or 4 hours or 2 hours or whatever it was you have in your project time budget. Take that from the end of the day when you're exhausted and put it at the beginning of the day. If you are exhausted during meetings, there's other people there to carry the weight. If you're exhausted during the design process, then that fails you, and there is no one there to save you. At least that would be my advice.
Yes, give you the quiet round of applause there. Yes, cheers. I've written down a bunch of things here because this is absolutely a common problem or a set of problems, really. I mean, this person has spoken to quality of work, the amount of time they have to do work, the fact that their company are hired guns and now they're transitioning out. And many of us who've worked in agencies and consultancies have definitely been there. Deanna says, great advice. Darren says, howdy, folks. And Credence is clapping. So a couple of things that I've written down. Number one, I wrote down, you're doing the best you can. So remember, while you might feel like, am I even doing good design work? Is this, don't let this question you. I don't know you. These questions come in anonymously, but you're probably pretty good at this. And you got the job. You're doing the work, but you're doing the best you can with the situation and scenario that you have. So you have to cut yourself some slack. If you had more time, you would do better work. So don't dump this on yourself. You're transitioning out in 2-ish weeks. Breathe. Number two, I know it's 2 weeks left and it's wrapping up. Hey, Ader. But one thing that some of my good managers have told me in the past when I ran into this at my jobs, especially at Macy's when I was there for 2 years, is require that every meeting calendar event that you get, those meeting requests or those calendar requests, they have to have an agenda. And that way do I need to be there? Is this meeting really for me or about me? And sometimes I'll say to people, I need to get some time back in my day. I'm not going to come to that meeting, but please, somebody take 2 minutes at the end of the meeting and just write me a little note summing up what happened. Is this a meeting where an important decision is being made? Is this a meeting you have to be at? Now, your question made it sound like a lot of these meetings are maybe people looking at your design and trying to co-design it or tell you what to do or change. That unfortunately means they see you as a pair of hands. They don't see you as a partner who's finding and solving problems. They see you as kind of a production designer. Do you have to be in that meeting? If that's the relationship your company has with them, You can always try something a little more asynchronous and say, here's my latest design. Please email me back with any concerns you have, or let me know anything that you think won't connect well with users. Notice I'm not asking, what do you think of it? Or do you like it? I'm talking about the users. Let me know if you see anything here that won't connect with the users or doesn't solve our original goal. Um, but say no to meetings and block that time out for yourself. You might have to talk to your manager. You have to find time to do the work. And third, I know your company's transitioning out of here, but the other thing I've written in my notes here is this project has no strategy. And I hear this so often that it ended up in my new book, Plug, Customers Know You Suck. It's really common where, thank you, where we have a list of things to do. So people think we have a plan, we have a roadmap, we have a strategy. And very often we don't. We just have a glorified to-do list. So I think that wherever your consultancy or agency puts you next, watch out for these things so that you can catch them early. Catch it early when you're treated as a production designer, like just make the changes we say, because you might be good at UX and you might have some good reasons to not do those things. Catch it early when you're being invited to an endless mountain of meetings that you don't really need to be at. And catch it early when it looks like a project doesn't seem to have a clear strategy, where maybe there isn't a project manager or it's not being managed well. And oh, thank you, Meredith. Thank you very much. Very sweet. Thank you all. So these are some things that I would say, they might help you more next time than this time because you're already on your way out, but some things to think about. While I queue up the next question, John, what do you want to add?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to add that when you're on your way out is actually a great time to get a new perspective like this, because another thing that you should be alert for is whether or not the contracting agency you're working with does post action reviews. Now, they might not call them that, but if a team has worked together, there should always be some time for reflection at the end of the project. How could we as individuals and how could this company as a group have improved the service we delivered? And that's the time to find out um, whether or not they even care about the kind of process you're going through. In the same way that every meeting needs an agenda so that everyone's on the same page, every project needs an agenda too. Like Debbie was saying, not just a set of items on a to do list, but an actual plan of how these things are going to flow together. I've worked with a lot of contracting agencies, and it's not uncommon for people to be managing projects for contracting agencies without the ability or the knowledge of how to plan a project.
Yep, we've seen it. Okay, thank you. Let me put up the next question. This one's in a slightly larger font because it was long, but not that long. It says, some colleagues from other roles would say, you are the expert in this regarding design decisions. And on one side, it's nice that we respect each other's roles. But on the other hand, as a junior designer, I feel a bit of panic inside me. I feel like I don't have enough experience yet to be the expert. And on one side, I feel like I do know more than someone that didn't study UX. But on the other, I feel pressure I'm not sure what this word is. Anyway, I'm worried they might lose respect in my expertise. How should I position myself with this? After how much time and project are you an expert?
Nice. Well, I'd say you're an expert when your job description includes the word expert in it, or your job title includes the word expert. Um, Expert is a really strange word. I've been hired as a UX expert before. I've had that as my title in a company. And even with the decades of experience and the stupid number of degrees, um, I don't like to think of myself as an expert, because expert gives this idea that your opinion shouldn't be challenged. You're the one who
Mm.
knows these things. That's not how work should happen in the 21st century. I hate it when someone whose motivations and knowledge is different than mine insists that I'm wrong. But I love it when someone's motivation, whose motivations and knowledge is different from mine, challenges me without insisting that I'm wrong. I know as a scientist, I'm probably wrong in everything I say and do. It's just a question of time. If I'm not wrong right now, I'll be proved wrong in a generation or two. Um, so I don't have trouble being wrong, but I want to be in an environment where people collaborate on finding better ways, not where people absolve themselves of responsibility by handing it to someone, especially if that someone is lacking experience and confidence.
Yeah, I want to throw another angle at this, even though I love what you said. I want to throw another angle at this. And one of them is I do think of myself as a bit of an expert because I have some expertise, but I wouldn't go around going, I am an expert. And I'm also still also learning. So I'm someone with some expertise who's always learning and growing and trying new things. Yes, thank you, you too. But the thing that jumped out at me about this question was I feel like we all complain about so many crappy UX jobs that treat us like anybody can do your job. Your job's easy. You put squares on a thing. I think there's maybe something wonderful about these people saying you're the expert in this. I don't know what else is going on at this job, and maybe you have some sad stories, but it does seem like a bit of a sign of respect that there's a kind of a is deference the right word there? Like there's kind of hey, you've made this design decision and you're the expert, so we're kind of trusting you. To me, the implication, even though you didn't tell it in the story, is they're not questioning you. You said there is respect for each other's roles, but you're just having some doubts because you feel junior. Okay, but you're a junior with some education and evidently some skill, and evidently people respect you. So you must be doing something right, whoever you are. Um,
You're,
so,
and don't lose those self doubts. Please don't lose that as your career matures. Right? It's good to have self doubt. Just don't let it be crippling. Let
yeah,
it
and
challenge you to try.
And
Sorry.
Darren is saying at times someone saying you're the expert can be passive aggressive. It's possible, certainly depends on the tone of voice in the scenario. If it comes with a lot of eye rolling and they're going, well, you're the expert, then obviously we've got some tone of voice and body language there that show disrespect. But it sounds like from this person's story, since they said, it's nice that we respect each other's roles. So I get the feeling that it's either this isn't passive aggressive or they're not perceiving it as passive aggressive. It sounds like they perceive it as wholly or partially genuine. And so I'm going to take it as that. I'm going to take it at that face value and not assume passive aggression, though it could be. So I would say if there's a healthy respect there, and they think you're an expert, that's great. I would say thank you. One thing I don't want to do is I feel like it's so rare for us in UX to be appreciated and respected. I think the last thing I want to do is start going, oh no, I'm not an expert. I'm new at this. I barely just started a career. Don't cut yourself down. Sure, you're not an expert. That's okay. That just means don't you go around and go, I'm an expert. But if someone says, hey, you're the expert, what they're really saying is, you know more than I do, and I trust you on this. And I say the right response is, thank you.
Bravo. Bravo. Brava. Yeah,
Grazie.
I'll change my answer to come in 100% behind what Debbie just said. Um, but by all means, always accept a compliment. And if you are uncertain and there are UX people you trust there who you can talk with about your uncertainties, then you can ask them about this too. If there aren't, or even if there are, there's an awful lot of content at the Delta CX site that will help you feel more like an expert, right? Give that a try.
Yes, we have things here. We've got two more questions that came in ahead of time. So if you have questions, please get them in the chat or send them in anonymously at deltacx.com/links and we'll get them on the list. But we've got two more, and then it looks like my name is, which is a fun name, has a question, and we'll put you at the end of the list. First, let's take a look at this other one that came in early. Sorry again about the small font. I will read it out loud, and then we'll get my name is on the end of the list. Okay, this says, I was talking about how messy a current project is and the company org and how they have so much budget, but they want us to design stuff before setting up a clear vision, doing proper research, etc. And she told me that when she was younger, her mentor would say, "You got to build the plane while it's flying." And she would get super annoyed at it because, OMG, who would want that? But then with time, she saw that it's true for basically all projects and you just need to accept it. I would like to hear your take on this. Not on the idea of building the plane while flying. I can imagine what your opinion is based on your books and videos advocating for better process, but how true it is. Like, out of all the projects you did, how many were actually good ones from a process point of view? What is a percentage of good, sensible projects and messy ones?
Wow, great question. Debbie, that seems to be very directed at you. If you'd like to go ahead and give your percentages first, I'll follow up.
I am not sure I have percentages, but I'm going to get my name is and Ader's questions on the list, and then we'll take a look back at this anonymous one. And
Okay.
okay, so do you have to build the plane while it's flying? I'm going to address that, even though you said I don't have to. But I think that, again, it comes back to project strategy. When the project doesn't have a clear strategy, we often are building the plane while it's flying. And a lot of the projects I've been on, even at very famous companies, had misguided or no strategy. Sometimes it was, hey, can you just copy what those guys are doing? Just make me some wireframes that copy those guys. That's not a strategy. And I am slightly building the plane while it's flying because I'm trying to take whatever that is and make it better and more relevant to our customers without good research data. So there are times where we are building the plane while it's flying, and I'm not sure it's something anybody ever feels super used to, but I think as you experience it more and maybe get older, you just have a sense of, I've built a plane while it's flying before, so this sucks, but I can do it. So I don't think it ever doesn't suck, but you'll feel like, all right, I think I know what to do here. But then as for, what about projects we did? How many were actually good from a process point of view? I have rarely been involved in projects that were good from a process point of view. The best projects come through the Delta CX company where I get to say what the process is. Um, those go pretty well. But as for, Darren says, I call it UX train hopping. Um, but yeah, for the corporate jobs that I've had, and even some of the agency work I've had, I think it has been um, unstructured and sometimes just do something the client wants, but that's usually without research, and we're guessing along the way. So yeah, I can't say what percentage, but I would say I do believe that agencies and consultancies that really care about user-centered design and human-centered design usually have good process and they're being hired for that process. And sometimes people like us end up at those companies because we want to do these things well. Most, if not all, of my corporate jobs and some of my agency jobs were, hey, the client thinks we should do a thing, make the best screens you can.
Yeah.
What do you want
Yeah.
to add, John?
I'll agree with just about everything you said. I want to start though by doing what you did and talking about building planes while they're flying. Aviation safety intelligence used to be my field for the government of Canada, and nobody builds a plane while it's flying. What you end up having to do sometimes in extreme emergencies is to repair a plane while it's flying. So some part of the plane isn't working well, and in order to avoid death and destruction, you have to make a few tweaks here and there, or take out a system, or put in a new system. So this does happen. And the analogy that people use in software companies, building the plane while it's flying, is an absolutely ridiculous analogy. Nobody should ever try to do that. Building the plane while you're flying is what you do when there is an emergency going on and the system you have in place has failed. This implies strongly that you must have a system in place. So when you're working on a project and there isn't a system in place that says exactly how this project is going to run, we're going to have this path that we follow. We're going to interact in these ways at these times in order to achieve results that should fit into these buckets. If there are errors in our planning that come along, if there are emergencies that come along with the client or the process, then we have these paths already planned out that we can deviate onto, right? So to use the analogy of the plane, that's how plane flying works. And that's how engineering works. If you're riding on a plane and a system fails, there are systems in place to replace that system. If those all fail, there are workarounds in place, and the pilots have been trained in how to go one workaround another. That normal type of management that is lacking in our industry. So, like Debbie wants to come in and plan out how a project is going. I tend to planning that I can, according to that old rule that's attributed to thousands of people, anyone who was dead before your grandma was probably been accused of, if I have 2 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first hour and a half sharpening, and don't like to do. There's a crazy idea that you should hurry up things, that you should fail fast. Failing fast only works if you have a system in place that allows you to and learn from it. The recovery system planning. So most of the companies that I've worked for
Oops.
on a consulting basis, hey,
Sorry, I did that.
no worries, consulting basis, and fix what I usually left out of my a consulting UX researcher when I'm not lecturing, and that means a process that has failed, and they don't know why it's. So when I worked at most of the things you've heard of, that's how I was brought in because they couldn't make something.
I've got to interrupt you for a moment. Your Wi-Fi seems to be a little bit unreliable, and so your audio has been breaking up, and that's why people are getting some pieces of what you're saying, and you see some comments about the audio being bad. My system tries to accommodate for that by lowering your video bandwidth and making you a little bit more pixelated and jagged, but the audio was super choppy, so I don't know if you know if something is funky over in your internet land. It doesn't look like it's me. I'm not placing blame. I'm just checking.
No, I here to check another system, but no, I don't believe it. I've had a lidded screen since we started, and I can't read any of those messages that are popping. But I'm very sorry that my acted speech was not working.
Yeah, it's a little bit blippy where it's crackly, blippy, and okay, people are saying it's not me. So that means for a change, it's not my internet. Usually my internet dies in the middle of the show. So people are saying it's you. I don't know if do you have a backup internet you can switch to or something. Over here we have 4 internet connections in case we have to switch to a backup.
Gosh, it's really too bad during our prep time beforehand.
Yeah, sorry. It's you know, Wi-Fi goes bad at any minute.
Yeah, it says that it is working perfectly with lots and lots of bandwidth there. Let me just a moment longer here, just to see if I'm catching anything. I do not think that's going wrong. Now, on the other hand, I'm in California right now, and we are having another one of those horror days where all of the world seems to have decided on our heads. So it could just be that way across California right now. Everybody stays indoors, using the main television services because they can't go outside. We get bandwidth troubles. This is really, we should just reschedule.
Let me see. I'm just checking my system. Would turning video off help? Do you want to try turning off the camera? You have a little control. You should have a little icon on the bottom that turns off your camera.
Yeah, let's see if that does it.
Okay, let's see if that helps.
Okay, if I start a long rambling answer now, sound breaking up or not?
Yeah, it's still breaking up. I'm showing packets lost. I've got a whole little screen that I can look at that shows me the quality of your broadcast, and it's still showing me lost packets. I don't know what else to tell everybody. And Jennifer is asking, I've never been to one of these before. Do we share our questions and get feedback from you and your guests? Yes, we normally do. I think we're trying to decide right now if the show goes on or if the show ends early due to some quality issues. I do have next Tuesday open, John, if you want to come back for a command performance and brave the Wi-Fi's and answer some more of the questions, because we do have a few more questions on the list. We have something from My Name Is and Ader, and I would love to get people's questions answered, but we can't totally hear you.
I'm really sorry for that. Again, everything that I'm reading here says that
It's
everything is
sounding better
captured.
now. Let's try to keep going with our apologies to people for a little bit of a break to talk about Wi-Fi speed. It's
Okay,
sounding
if
better.
it does start breaking up again, please just flag me, okay?
Okay, you
And
got it. I've got many flags. I will go, ah. Yeah, sounds fine. So, yeah, Jennifer, send in your question. We've got 3 questions, I think, on the list, so you would be fourth. So, the last question that came in ahead of time before we get to the questions that came in today was, what makes a bad UX designer? How do I know if I am one?
a bad UX designer is someone who designs from habit or from orders from others, as opposed to designing from UX. I think that I'd say most of the bad UX designers I've known aren't UX designers. They're designers who have UX in front of their name because of the job title. So I think that's not every type of bad UX designer, but that is absolutely a very common sort. So if you are actually using UX research and UX principles in your designs, then there is a significant chance that you are not among the majority of bad UX designers. Once you've gotten past that first hurdle, then it's a question of how well you use them. How good is your experimental design? How good is your design work once you've gotten data from your experiments? If you're doing bad research, you could be the best designer in the world and you wouldn't do good UX design. If you're doing good research, but you don't know how to translate that into designs, then you won't be a good UX designer. So there's a lot of ways to fail. Um, Maybe the question to ask yourself, if you want to know if you are one, is to ask yourself, would this design have been done differently if I had gotten different information?
Hmm.
And the answer should be 100% it would have been done differently.
Yeah, and I've got a new slide on this that I'm going to do on the show on April 7th. And I talk about how a lot of our bad design, or sometimes who we think is a bad designer, is real. The root cause there is really the lack of research. That we have people who might have talent and could be good at this and could be a good designer, but we're not giving them the right information to do good work, and that leaves them guessing and hoping, and that doesn't make them a bad designer, but it could be a talented designer ending up with some bad guesses. And Adair says you can also be a good UX designer working in a bad environment. Yeah, absolutely. And Jennifer, we'll put your question on the end of the list. Thank you for that question. So I would say, how do I know? Darren says bad environments squander talent and gaslight them. Yes. So again, I would say, sometimes what I see as a bad designer is a person who doesn't have process. And this becomes a fight on LinkedIn. You always see some of the fake it till you make it crowd saying, there is no UX process. There is no design process. Just do what you want and we'll all get there and it'll be fine. And I think, we do have a process. It's called user-centered design, human-centered design. It's got ISO standards. There are processes and things that we do. Now, you're not always going to follow them exactly or in order. It's going to be fluid and cyclical, but I always find that some of the people who I've felt were bad designers didn't seem to have a process. Hey, here's our project. How are you going to approach it? No, I'll just design something. I'll open up Figma, Illustrator, whatever it was back in the day. I'll just make a thing. This goes back to strategy. What's going to be your strategic approach to this project? Even if we can't solve a user problem when we're trying to solve a business problem, how are you going to do this? And so to me, some of the people who I thought were bad designers were either lack of knowledge, like, hey, all I know is the 10 Medium articles I've read, and I think that's what UX is, and I'm just going to, take a guess at this. That doesn't mean you're a bad designer. It just means you're probably not doing great work yet because your knowledge and skill are quite low. But to me, some of the bad designers I've seen ignore good data, ignore research. One of the worst designers I worked with couldn't do any work himself. Whenever there was something he had to do, he wanted to pull us all into a meeting to brainstorm his project. Now, the funny thing is, now we're so used to these bullshit theater workshops that doesn't even seem weird, right? The idea that we're all going to be pulled into a freaking meeting to help Adam design something. But 10 years ago, this was sacrilegious, and we thought this guy sucked. Because he couldn't seem to do his work himself. And every time he had to do something, he pulled us all into a meeting for us to figure out what he should design. And that to me is not a great designer. He might be a good production designer. He might be good at taking orders and making the thing that people have already decided, but he's probably not a good problem solving type of designer. Chad says, hi, Chad, good to see you again. Says, start measuring the success of your solutions. Yeah, though sometimes you can't, and sometimes you didn't get to make good solutions. You were told, make what that other guy's doing. Solomon says, the brainstorm designer, the most annoying type. Yeah, this guy was a total imposter. John, anything to add before I put up the next question?
Yeah, please. One time here in California, I was managing a designer whose work just kept disappointing me. And every time we met one on one, he was brilliant. He was insightful. He was clever, very knowledgeable. But the work he was doing on the project kept ignoring the research and ignoring the client needs and ignoring demonstrated demands from the client. And finally, I confronted him about it. I said, what's changing between when we're sitting together and when you're doing the work that I see in the client-facing presentations? And he explained to me that it was a senior person in our company who had an established relationship with the client who was demanding that he do things differently. So he was told to share his rough designs before finishing them. And then this person with no interest at all in due process was coming in and just throwing away all of them. No, you have to have more red in there. No, these guys want to see this type of button, not that type of button. And just absolutely, yes, ridiculous demands. This poor fellow was working twice as hard as he had to try to get good designs finished, as well as the demanded horrible designs, and to try to squeeze some good designs into the client-facing presentations. Because of the nature of that company, things did not work out for him or for me there.
Right.
Yeah, it was a real cultural.
Yeah. And Darren says, sounds like the old classic UX saboteur. And Jennifer says, I think bad designers probably don't ask, am I a bad designer? It's great you're looking inward to see if you're doing all it takes to design well. Smart people ask questions. Yeah, I think it's great to be looking in that mirror and trying to have that self-awareness and say, am I good at this and can I be better? And the answer might be, you might be good at this and we can all always be better. That doesn't mean you're a bad designer. It means we all always have room for improvement. Claire says, +1 sabotage. Okay, so let's put up our next question, which is, we've been given 3 customers, about 10 users in total, I'm sorry, we've given 3 customers, about 10 users in total, access to our software as early adopters. What's your advice to getting feedback from them? Interviews?
Ooh, gosh. If your software is entirely orally communicated and engages with them only on an intellectual level, then interviews should reveal some information that's useful. If
But
your software, oh, sorry, sometimes the sarcasm just drips out. Um, if your software is intended to involve them in a process that involves them as whole beings trying to accomplish something, then you have to observe them in that process, because what they're actually doing, just like all of us, is not what they think they're doing or what they will say they're doing. If you ask someone something in an interview, even the best interviewers can usually only find out whatever that person feels like saying at the time. Certainly in scientific interviews, this is the case.
yes,
Reporters get to play a few mind games to try to fool people into saying more that scientists shouldn't do. So the best thing is to watch them work, observe it, observe what they're really doing, observe what works well and what doesn't. I hope all of that answer came through.
I got it. Yes, you're sounding great and sounding great. And yeah, to add to that, I definitely agree with the observations. You're going to see more than you're going to hear. And remember, if you're, I don't know how new you are to this, my name is, but I would say remember to give them a high level or a common task, not high level, but a common task, and then shut up. So you're in the system, you're trying, you need to do this, go. Oh yeah, Jennifer's saying the same thing. Ask them to accomplish a task and watch them. Yeah, absolutely. That's the best way to go. And shut up. Don't interrupt them to go, "Why'd you do that? Why didn't you?" And don't ask them the common questions of, "Did you see this button here? What do you think it does?" Boo, fuckity boo.
Ooh,
So yeah,
ooh.
don't do those. Don't do those. Don't make those common mistakes of, "Hey, do you see this menu here? You know, what do you think?" So just make sure you're watching them do a task, and no matter what they say, even if they go, "Oh, this is easy," or "Hey, this isn't bad," remember that your insights are not, "Client thinks this is easy." Your insights are, "Client said this was easy while making a mistake." Client said this was pretty good while entering in the completely wrong information and pressing the wrong button. So make sure you're looking at what people are doing. And even if they say polite or friendly or positive things, it doesn't mean it is a great experience. And it doesn't mean that there isn't vast room for improvement.
Yeah,
Solomon says
that's a
people
real
aren't
good.
good at articulating with words how and why they do things in most contexts. And Jennifer says, "I love this. Your actions speak so loud I can't hear what you're saying." Yeah.
Very nice phrase. Um, I'd like to add that if you have early adopters and you want to have early adopters, you should also throw them some bones. And I don't mean throw them branded giftware, and I don't mean give them Amazon vouchers, and I certainly don't mean pretend that their verbally expressed opinions are important to you. But their verbally expressed opinions are important to them, so you have to value them. Just don't take them as UX data, take them as customer data. So by all means, survey them, ask them how they feel, ask them what they think, ask for their opinions. If you're doing that, most importantly, ask them what was impossible and separate yourself from the people who built the product. That's a really important thing when you're doing any kind of interviews of users, early adopters or not. Make it really clear that honest opinions aren't going to hurt your feelings. And then be prepared to ignore most of what they say, because context will tell you whether or not they're just saying something in order to say it.
Yeah, and we also had a comment from Milky Drops that just blasted off the screen, but it said, "I always look at product analytics first if they're available for the user and then interview them, but keep things super open ended." You can look at product analytics like we talked about yesterday in yesterday's stream, episode 34 of Think Out Loud, and Chad Cogill really had a great idea there in yesterday's show. Yes, sometimes you can use product analytics, but remember that's not going to tell you much about the user experience. It might tell you how far they get in a funnel. It might tell you how often they click a thing. It might tell you if they clicked on this or that, or how long they stayed here. But we're really not going to know much about the usability. So remember that the product analytics are data that we can consider, and they might play into this, but they're definitely not the only piece of information we need. So I would probably say analytics plus interview would not be my first choice. My first choice is usually observations. Cool. Got a couple of more questions. One was Ader's follow-up to that, which was on a related topic. How do we respectfully push back on, say, product managers trying to tell you how to do research when they clearly don't really understand research that well? Hey, I wrote a book about that.
Show us the cover of the book there, Debbie. You wouldn't have a copy of that cover you could actually show people
You
to
know,
help
I
remind them.
do. I do. Of course, I have my graphic that I can roll in at just the touch of a
Look at that.
button. But yes, I also happen to have a hardcover on my desk. So, ta-da.
Yay.
cxcc.to/CKYS. That will get you to buy the book. If you'd like to, for as little as $1 on my website, or you can buy print versions, which are more. Ader says, I haven't gotten to that part yet. Okay, so do you want to help him first? Pushing back on product managers on how you should do your research.
It's a hard one because in an ideal world where everyone is trying to work for the best of the company and the client, then yeah, you can push back on a product manager or a project manager. You can't do that with a lot of folks I've worked with who will take that as an invitation to fight, and for them that means an invitation to do terrible, terrible things in the name of being the last one standing. Um, if you need to push back on a manager and you don't know whether they are that one type of person or that other type of person, um, I think it's not a bad idea to ask them to expand on their decision. If they really think that you should change something that you've done, ask them to justify it so that you can learn from the experience and make better decisions in the future. You're walking a fine line there. Sometimes it's easier for a white-haired or largely bald old man to say things like that and still be treated with some respect. Sometimes it's even worse. So yeah, it's a very very difficult situation to be in. Um, yeah, if you can make it part of the process review at the end of the project, where
Retro.
senior to both of you are being made aware of the fact that this person doesn't value your job. Because if that's the case, then management should either stop supporting them in that position or stop supporting you in yours.
Yes, I do tell stories here about times I have quit jobs and told HR, don't replace me. You don't want this role here.
Yeah.
My answer to this is, and then we've got two more questions, so I hope you don't mind staying a droplet late.
Love.
And then I've got to run because someone is recording a podcast with me. So I'm on their podcast in a half hour. It's pre-recorded. So Adair, I think one of the things that will help, there's a couple of things. Number one, wouldn't it be great if someone said, you're the expert, I defer to you. So, last person, you've got it good. So one would be to try to find some sort of gentle way that matches your personality and your culture. I don't know much about the Brazilian culture, but some way that matches to say, well, this is my domain. And so if we are going to do research, and if it's my job to get us the evidence and information that set us up for success, then it's my job to plan that research in the way that will get us that information. I recognize that you'd like to have it faster, and I recognize that you're hoping that a survey will be good enough. And there are times when we can run a survey, but in this case, we're not going to know the answers to these questions unless we do this type of study for this long, and that's why I'm suggesting it. Adair, I think another thing would be to run the quadrant exercise that we did yesterday. For those of you who are who have no idea what I'm talking about, we've been running these quadrant exercises in Miro. You can see it in yesterday's stream, which was episode 34 in the Think Out Loud playlist. And I would say the quadrant exercise is a good one to run because it gets unanswered questions about your users and their context from your cross-functional team. And when you have those unanswered questions or guesses, assumptions, whatever they might be, now you can say, wow, we probably shouldn't move forward with this project. While there are so many unanswered questions, let me, oh, hey, Diggs, this is something that we should probably have the answers to set us up for success. Here's the research that I recommend we do, and here's why the focus group isn't right. Here's why the survey isn't enough. Here's why reading the analytics won't be enough. And you just have to have that solid plan. So I'm hoping that will work. Oh, Anne says, is John on LinkedIn? There's so many John Browns. Yes, put in John N.A. Brown, like is on the screen. John space N.A. space Brown. Chad says, ask them what concerns they have about your research plan or suggestion. Yeah, and make sure it's not, why don't you like it or what do you think about it? Always bring it questions back to the users. What about my research plan makes you believe we're not going to find out what we need to about our users? Because I don't care what you think of it. I care about, are we going to get the right answers?
Yeah.
Le-
It's not bad to ask them also, just to follow up on that, Debbie, to ask them also, am I supposed to be following your guidelines or the guidelines of the people who set up the project? Are you defining what my job is, or is my job already defined before you raise these issues?
yeah, that
You
can
know,
sound
like
a
you do
little
it
accidentally
constantly.
aggressive. So I would
Yeah.
probably say, I'd probably find some other way to try to say, it reminds me of, I'm a big fan of Kids in the Hall, the comedy troupe. And there was a line in a sketch that goes by so fast you kind of miss it, kind of Groucho Marxy style. And a guy and a man and a woman are in a fight. And I think they're essentially strangers. And the man says to the woman, do I show up to your job and jump up and down on the end of the bed and tell you what to do? And I was like, oh, that's really subtle because you have bed in there, which implies you think this person is some sort of prostitute. So like there's a lot in there. But like, yeah, do I show up at your job and jump up on the bed and tell you what to do? So um yeah, we have to find a gentle way to say, hey, I'm not telling you how to make a product roadmap.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's what I was trying to suggest, and it probably comes across as aggressive because I'm such a mean and nasty person. But what I was trying to
Doobly.
suggest is that it's good to turn the question on them and do it politely and do it quietly and in a friendly fashion. But if they believe that they have a right to interfere with how you work, then ask them about that, right? If they do have that right, then you have to change the way you work. If they don't have that right, then they have to change the way they work. And that's not a decision that either of you gets to make. That's a decision that's supposed to be made by whoever is managing both of you.
Thank you there. Okay, second to last question came from Jennifer. Thank you for your patience. Jennifer asks, do you have any experience leading a town hall type of format for gathering feedback from users? If so, do you have any tips? To give some context, we're hoping to have 100 or so guests watch a short demo and provide feedback. I have some ideas about how to do this, but would love to hear about your experience. And John, you seem to have a reaction when I said town hall, so tell us what you're thinking.
Yeah, there's an old saying from the writer Robert Heinlein that if you want to know the intelligence of a mass of people, you take the average intelligence of each individual and divide it by the number of feet in the crowd. Um, Mobs behave like mobs because they can't think. Crowds behave like crowds because they can't think. Even a friendly crowd will fall into patterns of behavior that most of them wouldn't do on their own. And the same is true with patterns of answers and reactions. It's part of the very old part of our brain and how we respond to things. If everyone in the crowd is happy, you will be happy. If everyone in the crowd is angry, you will be angry. Most of what happens is a unconscious desire to fit in, and in order to fit in, one of the things that happens is this parroting of the reactions you expect others to have. Another thing that happens, even more common, is shutting down of communication. So it's really a good idea not to do large town halls, not to do large meetings. You can control that a bit by making the feedback they're giving entirely private. But if you have access to 100 people, do 20 interviews of five, do 100 interviews of one, and watch them work. Um, Anything you can do where the person is the single respondent and gets to be the center of attention is going to work out better for you if you use good ethnographic methods. That would be my advice. There are things you can accomplish with a town hall meeting, but I would say the purpose of a town hall meeting is usually the illusion of communication from the crowd with the intention of communication from the stage. And if that's not what you're trying to do, then don't use a town hall meeting.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think the town hall is not the right format. I think of a town hall as a place to make a corporate announcement and maybe take a few questions, sometimes questions that have been planned ahead of time. I don't think of a town hall, or I don't want to turn a town hall into essentially a giant monster focus group where you've got, a squillion people there. And the problem is, if you're showing them a demo, you're showing them what you believe is the correct way to move through the product. So it's definitely not a usability test, and it's definitely not letting people go through it because they might pick another path or other choices, or they might make a mistake. And we would learn so much more about how this could be improved because once we demo it, we can't really usability test on these people. They have seen the best practice. They have seen the best way to move through this thing. So now you have to cross them off your list for individual usability testing. They are a tainted group. So I think that if you feel like you have to get feedback from them, I would give them an anonymous survey and I would ask them one question with an open box, and it would be, how can this be improved? Or based on your workflow, how could this be improved? That's the only thing I would ask. I wouldn't ask, do you like it? Would you use it? Would your cousin like it? What would you pay for it? Whatever. I would just say, people are saying they can't find you on LinkedIn. It's John space N-A space Brown. I promise he's there. It probably says San Francisco Bay Area. Jennifer says, I
Yep.
agree. This wasn't my idea, but I've been asked to help out. These are great reminders. Thank you.
Excellent. Should I post a LinkedIn link in the chat here, or is that just asking for disaster?
It's not that it's asking for disaster. The problem is you can't post a link because only I can as the person who runs the show, and um that's just to keep spam out of the world. So it's oh, I see
Yeah,
the
it looks like
problem.
we've
You
solved it.
have periods in your so it's John space N period A period space Brown. So let me just
There
copy
it
and
is.
paste that
It looks
into
like folks have found
it's
it and shared that. So that's great. And thank you
yeah.
for sharing it.
Yeah, the problem is you can't I think only I can post a link. Did that come up, everybody? Does John want us to connect with him?
Yes,
Does
please
Yes,
reach out.
please, says John.
Is Especially if there's some way that I can be of help to you. If you want to connect just so that you have an expanded network, then
Fuck
please
you.
don't. If you want to connect just so that you can reach some of the people I'm connected to, please don't.
And that
But
leads us to a great closing question, which is, does John Brown offer mentorship like Debbie? So I do free mentor a couple of people, but then I also charge for coaching. Many people know I charge 50 American dollars for a half hour. I would think John could surely charge that or much more. John, would you like to be privately coaching and mentoring some peeps?
I love coaching and mentoring. It's one of the favorite things I do. Um, Usually, when I've done coaching recently or mentoring more formally recently, it's because somebody has been recommended by someone I've mentored in the past, or by a friend or former associate. I'd be happy to consider helping people out. I hope to have a bit of news in the near future. Certainly by the next time I appear here, I hope to have some news about new opportunities for very formal relationships between myself and anyone who wants to learn from me. But I think that's as much of a hint as I can give right now.
That tells me that something I thought could be. So yes. Ader likes your speaking voice, so do I. Many of us are fans. Jennifer says, very kind of both of you to provide your advice and expertise. Thank you for your time. Yes, I'm here every Tuesday pretty much at 6:30 p.m. Italy time. I think once every month or every other month, John joins us. We have a couple of other regulars who drop by as special guest question answerers. Yeah, so John will have to check the calendar since I messed up this week's, and we'll have to see when you are coming back. Yeah, and then, maybe one time we could both broadcast from this desk. Maybe you'll come visit. Who can say?
Wouldn't that be cool? That would be absolutely lovely.
Yes.
Yeah, if not that desk, then certainly we can continue doing this from two different desks. It's just mine may not be here anymore.
I understand.
My
You're
here may be a different here.
always new things, and that's fine as long as we can get you in one way or another. And yes, Jennifer says, I guess I'll see you every week then. Yeah, and if you ever miss one, just know these are archived on YouTube. LinkedIn is really not good at finding old videos. LinkedIn's video system sucks, but we are on YouTube. Delta CX on YouTube. We are coming up on 7,000 subscribers, but we are still shadow banned. So please let people know about the Delta CX YouTube channel. We need all the love we can get there. Meredith says, thank you. Great information. Thank you. Sign language applause. Thank you to John for joining us. Again, find him on LinkedIn as John space N period A period. No spaces in between those. But then another space, Brown. John, any words before we say goodbye for this time?
My sincere apology to the person whose question I was answering that got cut off and garbled. I'm very sorry. Hopefully, you'll come to one of these live and we'll have a chance to make sure that you got the answers you need. To everyone else, thank you very much for being here. I really enjoy these sessions, Debbie, so thank you for having me. Yeah, folks, by all means, look for me on LinkedIn. If you browse the web enough, you'll find me elsewhere as well. I am not currently recruiting people to mentor, but if you really want to reach out and try to set that up through LinkedIn, let me know. In the meantime, Debbie is here and provides wonderful help for everyone who talks with her.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I try to think of this channel as kind of free group mentoring, and then some people sign up for the paid coaching. Milky Drop says, I wouldn't mind this show in a podcast format, but not the visual ones. Yeah, the problem is I was sending some of these shows to a podcasting system for a couple of years, but I kept finding that like 12 people were listening to them. So I just stopped about 6-8 months ago. It just didn't seem worth my time. There's a lot of time to prepare the files and put them up on the services. And only 3 people have complained since I stopped doing it, which means not that many people noticed. So sorry, Milky Drops. I tell people, just come to YouTube. If you happen to be a YouTube premium subscriber like I am, you can run a YouTube video with your phone screen off. So it kind of is like listening to a podcast. If you're not, I think you have to keep the YouTube screen on, and that's not as good an experience. But anyway, I'm going to play us out of here. I am a guest on someone else's podcast in 40 minutes, and I've got to put myself together. Yeah, Darren says, I never knew it was a podcast. Yeah, I put up the first 150 episodes, and they tended to get 12 listeners. And my thought was, not worth it. I'm just going to invest in the YouTube thing. So John, I'll be in touch with you on LinkedIn as usual when I figure out when our next adventures are to make sure we've got our dates right. But thank you so much for being here tonight, even though you weren't feeling totally well. Please feel better soon, and I'm going to play us out of here. So good night, everybody, and see you later this week. Bye. Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are